Welcome back, everyone. Before we dive in, make sure you drop your thoughts and the lessons you took from this story in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's get into it. Unaware that he was 10 steps ahead of her, the cheating wife filed for divorce and walked into the courthouse with her lover, laughing until the judge read the explosive documents. "I'm going to destroy you in court, Cameron. 70% of everything you have built will be mine after the divorce." Those were the last words Tiana Ellis Brooks whispered to her husband before walking into the courtroom with her lover, wearing a smile that could cut glass. She had no idea that the Black American man sitting across from her, Cameron Brooks, billionaire chief executive officer, was already 10 steps ahead of her. What happened next would shatter every illusion she had about marriage, money, and control. Cameron stepped off his private jet with the calm confidence of a man who controlled entire markets with a single signature. Yet beneath the refined surface, he carried a rare exhaustion that only long business trips carved into a person. The evening Georgia air was warm and carried the familiar scent of blooming dogwood, a reminder that he was finally home. Normally, his return from high-stakes deals took place late at night when a mansion was asleep and the halls were silent. But an unexpectedly early contract signing in Seattle meant he was landing almost 5 hours sooner than planned. He did not bother calling Tiana. He wanted the soft shock of surprising her, the look of delight she always gave him whenever he returned. At least, the look she used to give him. The car ride from the airstrip to the estate took almost an hour, and Cameron spent every minute imagining a peaceful night with his wife. The two of them sharing a late dinner, talking about nothing and everything. Despite their recent distance, a strange, quiet tension he could not name, he still believed in love, and he still believed in her. Tiana Ellis Brooks had been the bright, thrilling contrast to his disciplined world. She was a beautiful Black American woman who brought color into his monochrome life, laughter into his controlled spaces, and fire into his carefully calculated heart. Even after nearly a year of marriage, he still felt a softness around her, a tenderness that allowed him to be something other than a billionaire chief executive officer. With her, he felt like a man. When the car rolled up the long driveway lined with trimmed hedges and lights that glowed like fireflies, Cameron took a slow breath and adjusted his jacket. The mansion windows were illuminated, which meant she was still awake. He picked up his luggage, thanked the driver, and walked toward the front door with the quiet eagerness of a husband returning to warmth. The key turned smoothly in the lock, and he stepped into the familiar elegance of his home, the gleaming marble floors, the sweeping staircase, the faint lavender scent Tiana loved. He lifted his suitcase from the floor and began down the hallway, ready to call out her name, but he paused when he heard her voice drifting softly from the living room. It was not the gentle tone she used whenever she knew he was listening. This was a lower, more intimate voice, threaded with excitement, and something else, something darker. He frowned and took a silent step forward, not out of suspicion, but curiosity. He loved her. He trusted her. Whatever she was saying was surely innocent. But then the words reached him clearly. "Babe, we are going to cash out big." Cameron's body froze in place. Her voice was bright, almost playful, but each word fell like a blade against his chest. "According to my findings, he is worth over $30 billion, she continued, laughing softly. "He is the biggest catch so far." The suitcase slipped from Cameron's fingers but made no sound, cushioned by the thick rug beneath it. He felt the air leave his lungs, but his feet stayed rooted in place, unable to carry him forward or backward. The warmth he had been holding in his chest slowly drained away, replaced by a coldness so profound it felt like his heartbeat paused. "After we walk away," Tiana said, her tone turning sweet and conspiratorial, "I think we should finally stop this game and settle down. We are set for life after this. No more risks." Cameron swallowed hard as her words painted a reality he had never imagined. Game. Settle down. Cash out. The pieces rearranged themselves into a picture he did not want to see. Tiana sank deeper into her conversation, completely unaware of the man standing just feet behind the wall. "The lawyer I am using this time asked me to claim emotional abuse," she said casually, as if discussing a spa appointment. I will play the victim. You know how courts always favor women in divorce. Trust me, babe. He will not know what hit him. Cameron felt his jaw tighten. Emotional abuse. She was planning to weaponize lies against him, the man who had loved her without restraint. I cannot wait to explore the country with you, she whispered. You give me the energy he cannot provide. Honestly, if not for his money, what would I be doing with a boring man like him? But do not worry, babe. If not 70%, at least half of his empire will be ours soon. The final nail pierced his heart cleanly. Cameron shut his eyes for 10 seconds. He allowed himself to break in silence. Then he inhaled slowly, exhaled calmly, and his expression changed into something no one would expect from a man who had just learned he was nothing but a target. He straightened his jacket, schooled his face into neutrality. Only when Tiana said, "Hold on, I think he is home now," did he step forward into the hallway light. "Sweetheart," he called softly, his voice steady and warm. She ended the call instantly and rushed toward him with a smile bright enough to blind. "Cameron, you are home early." She threw her arms around his neck and kissed him deeply. His heart was breaking inside, but his face was calm and unreadable. The mansion glowed in soft amber lighting, casting warm reflections across the polished marble floors as Cameron walked inside, with Tiana curled against him like a woman genuinely happy to greet her husband. She held onto his arm with a gentle cling, her cheek brushing his shoulder in a gesture that would have once melted him, but now only deepened the ache beneath his ribs. Her perfume, white jasmine with a hint of vanilla, was intoxicating. Yet tonight, it felt more like a fragrance masking venom. "You should have called," she said, pulling back just enough to look into his eyes. "I would have prepared something special." He smiled at her, the expression smooth and effortless, refined from years of boardroom diplomacy. "Surprises are more fun." She laughed, and the sound was bright enough to almost convince him he had not heard her plotting minutes earlier. Almost. Her fingers slid down his arm, stopping at his hand, and she intertwined their fingers as naturally as breathing. "Come on, I made dinner earlier. It's still warm." She led him to the dining room, her steps light and graceful, every movement crafted like a woman who believed she had mastered the role of perfect wife. The dining table was set beautifully, gold-rimmed plates, linen napkins, and crystal glasses reflecting the chandelier's soft glow. He wondered if she always created such perfect scenes, or whether perfection was just part of the performance she used to manipulate wealthy men. Tonight he saw the stage lights behind everything she did. He sat down with a calmness so measured it felt like slipping into another person's skin entirely, one built for strategy, precision, and patience. Tiana served him grilled salmon, asparagus, and a creamy Parmesan risotto. She spoke about New Orleans, Miami, luxury spas, and fashion shows. She described upcoming girls' trips with dazzling excitement, her mouth forming dreams that she believed his money would soon fund. Through all of it, Cameron listened, nodded at the right moments, offered soft chuckles, and asked small questions. He made eye contact, smiled gently, and even reached for her hand halfway through dinner. Because tonight he was not a man in pain. He was a man preparing for war. And wars, he knew, were won with strategy, not emotion. Tiana leaned forward, swirling her wine glass thoughtfully. "Cameron, when you're done with your upcoming board meetings, we should spend a week in New Orleans, just the two of us. I feel like we need something romantic." Something romantic. The words echoed painfully. He imagined a voice he had heard minutes earlier. "If not for his money, what would I be doing with a boring man like him?" He pushed away the memory and offered her a tender smile. "New Orleans sounds wonderful." Her eyes sparkled. "I knew you would say yes." She looked happy, genuinely happy, and that was the part that hurt the most. She could twist herself into any shape, mold herself into any personality, become whatever her target needed her to be. It was her gift or her curse or both. They finished dinner. She laughed at his anecdotes. She leaned into him when they walked upstairs. She kissed him in the hallway, slow and affectionate. And though her lips were warm, Cameron felt nothing but cold resolve spreading through his veins. When she finally drifted off to sleep beside him, her breathing slow and steady, her face resting peacefully against the pillow. Cameron lay awake with his eyes fixed on the ceiling, the silence of the room pressing against him, thick and suffocating. He turned his head slightly, watching her. She looked serene, innocent, pure, a perfect lie wrapped in satin sheets. He moved carefully, sliding out from under the covers without waking her. The moment his feet touched the floor, something inside him shifted, something heavy, final, and irreversible. He walked across the room, opened the door quietly, and stepped into the dimly lit hallway. His study was downstairs, tucked away behind a double-paneled oak door. He entered, closed the door behind him, and stood for a long moment in the silence. The room was filled with warm, rich mahogany furniture, a wall of leather-bound books, and the faint smell of cedar. It had always been his safe place, a sanctuary where he organized his thoughts and controlled the world outside. Tonight, it became the place where he would dismantle an illusion. He sat down at his desk and opened the secure interface to the home's interior audio capture system. He typed in a password known only to him, pressed enter, and watched the timeline populate with recordings. He scrolled down to the most recent file, time-stamped 6:17 p.m. He clicked play. Tiana's voice filled the room, clear, sharp, and treacherously familiar. Every word she had spoken in the hallway came flooding back. Every criticism, every lie, every promise she made her lover about taking his empire, every insult she delivered so effortlessly. Cameron closed his eyes and let the recording wash over him, burning through the last remnants of affection he had once held. When the call ended, he pressed save, transferring the file onto an encrypted drive he kept hidden inside a drawer built specifically for confidential materials. When he finally walked back upstairs, the house felt different, larger, emptier, colder. He slipped into bed beside Tiana, who did not stir. She curled gently into his side, unaware she was losing everything. Cameron stared at the ceiling once more. Tonight, the marriage ended. The sun was barely rising when Cameron stepped into his office the next morning, the sharp click of the door closing behind him echoing louder than usual. He loosened his tie, exhaled deeply, and stared out at the city skyline for a long moment before settling into the leather chair behind his desk. The recording from the night before still replayed in the back of his mind, every word carving deeper grooves into his memory. But today was not about heartbreak. Today was about building the foundation of a silent counterattack. He lifted his phone and dialed. "Harold, I need you at the office as soon as possible." Harold Price, his lawyer of nearly 15 years, did not ask questions. "On my way," Harold said. Cameron ended the call, rubbed his temples, and allowed himself a brief moment of vulnerability, a single breath where the man underneath the billionaire exterior felt the sting of betrayal again. Then he straightened, restoring the mask of control that had allowed him to build an empire worth billions. When Harold walked in 40 minutes later, tall and broad-shouldered, with silver at his temples, a sharp black suit, and an expression carved from stone, he took one look at Cameron and knew something monumental had happened. "What is it?" he asked quietly. Cameron clicked on the audio file. Tiana's voice filled the office instantly, the same poisonous sweetness dripping from every sentence. She spoke of cashing out big, of claiming emotional abuse, of taking half of his fortune. She spoke of boredom and manipulation, of using him like a ladder to climb toward her own ambitions. She spoke of another man with desire and confidence that she would win. Harold listened with narrowed eyes, then let out a slow whistle. "Well, she is delusional but bold." Cameron said nothing. His gaze remained steady, cold, unreadable. Harold chuckled under his breath. "She thinks she is walking out with half your empire. Cameron, the limited liability company structure is ironclad. Nearly everything you own is protected as premarital, non-transferable assets. Even with the most aggressive attorney, she would be entitled to nothing but fumes." Cameron still did not respond. Harold leaned forward. "But the real treasure here is her own words. This recording destroys any narrative she could fabricate. Judges hate manipulated claims. If she attempts to portray herself as a victim, we will bury that argument before it even reaches the courtroom. Cameron finally spoke, his voice calm but empty. There is more. Harold raised a brow. What did she say? She said something that suggests this is not the first time, that this partnership of hers has been going on longer than our marriage. Harold nodded slowly. If that is the case, then this becomes bigger, much bigger. We're talking about a pattern of fraud, intentional deception, financial predation. I think you should call Lionel, Cameron said. Carter? Harold asked, already pulling out his phone. Good. If anyone can uncover the skeletons in her closet, it is him. Lionel Carter arrived at the building an hour later, a Black American man with a powerful frame, quiet eyes, and a presence that seemed to absorb rather than demand attention. He lived in the shadows by choice, a private investigator who preferred results over recognition. He joined them and listened to the recording without blinking. When the final second ended, he nodded once. Give me 5 days. Harold folded his arms. We need everything connecting her to this man. Lionel's lips curled slightly, the closest thing he had to a smile. You will get more than you expect. As Lionel left the office, Cameron stared at the closed door with a quiet heaviness. He did not know if the heaviness was loss or relief, maybe both. Betrayal had always felt like something that happened to other men who ignored warning signs or lived in denial. Cameron had believed himself immune to it, protected by loyalty, intelligence, and the love he thought he shared with his wife. But betrayal had found him anyway. The next days passed with an unsettling normality. Cameron slipped back into the role of loving husband with effortless precision. He woke beside Tiana, kissed her forehead each morning, complimented her outfits, and listened as she planned spa days, brunch outings, and imaginary vacations funded by the fortune she believed she would soon steal. He never faltered. His mask never cracked. Every evening, she curled up on the couch next to him, scrolling through her phone with a secretive smile. She had no idea that every word she had said, the entire performance she believed she had executed flawlessly, was now the catalyst for her downfall. On the 5th morning, Lionel returned to Cameron's office with a thick folder, his expression darker than before. You should sit, he said quietly. Cameron did. Lionel opened the file. What lay inside was a tapestry of deceit threaded with years of calculated seduction and financial manipulation. There were photos of Tiana with her lover, a Black American man named Eric Vaughn, emails, fake bank accounts, travel receipts, records of their previous relationships with wealthy men who had mysteriously lost large sums of money or assets following abrupt, dramatic breakups. She was not new to the game. She was an expert. She and Vaughn have been doing this for 6 years, Lionel said. You are their 4th victim. A cold, clean certainty settled in Cameron's chest. Not anger, not bitterness. Purpose. He closed the file gently. They wanted a fortune, he murmured. Instead, they will get prison. The change began subtly, almost invisibly, but Tiana felt it. She could not articulate it, could not place the source. Yet something about Cameron's energy began to unsettle her. He did not withdraw his affection. If anything, he continued playing the part of devoted husband with unnerving precision. But there were cracks, small, quiet cracks that made her uneasy. He no longer handed her his black card as casually as he once did. He no longer indulged every impulse she voiced. When she asked for a wire transfer for a girlfriend's trip, he gave her a soft, regretful smile instead. The company is facing some challenges, he murmured. Tiana's eyes widened. What kind of challenges? Temporary ones, he replied. Just financial tightening. We will be fine soon. Tiana had spent the last year bathing in luxury, as if it were oxygen. Designer handbags stacked in her closet like trophies. Weekly spa appointments that cost more than some people's rent. Bottles of rare champagne she opened just because she liked the sound of the cork. Now the slight restriction felt like suffocation. Her mind drifted back to the conversation she had with Eric. In her head, the plan was already in motion. They would file. They would cash out. They would disappear into a life of opulence that did not require her to pretend to love a man she had long deemed too gentle, too boring, too predictable. Predictable. She clung to that belief. 5 days passed. Cameron maintained a calm presence, moving through life with quiet elegance, reading in the evenings, making her breakfast when he was free, attending virtual meetings from his study, and never once hinting at the storm he had already begun engineering behind her back. Tiana mistook his composure for weakness. On the 7th night, the tension inside her finally reached its breaking point. Dinner had been quiet, too quiet. Cameron ate slowly, thoughtfully, his posture relaxed, his eyes soft. He looked at her with an affection she no longer appreciated. She stared back at him with a blend of frustration and calculation, her mind spinning with Eric's whispered promises and the imaginary life waiting on the other side of divorce court. At last, she dropped her fork with a sharp clatter that echoed through the dining room. The delicate sound barely startled Cameron, who simply lifted his gaze with polite concern. "I'm tired, Cameron," she said. He dabbed the corner of his mouth with a linen napkin. "Of what?" "This," she gestured vaguely around the room. "Of everything. I cannot continue like this." He tilted his head slightly. "What do you mean?" She did not answer. Instead, she stood abruptly, her chair sliding back with a scraping sound, and walked down the hallway with determined, confident steps. Cameron watched her calmly as she disappeared, but something inside him tightened. Not because he feared what was coming, but because this was the final confirmation that she was exactly who the evidence proved she was. When Tiana returned, she held a manila envelope, the same kind Cameron preferred in his own contracts. She placed it on the table in front of him, her chin lifted in triumph. "Sign the papers," she said coldly. "We are done. I refuse to stay in a marriage that no longer supports my lifestyle." Cameron's expression did not change. He took the envelope, opened it carefully, and slid the documents out. He scanned each page with the practiced ease of a man who had signed thousands of contracts. But even he paused at the audacity written into the divorce petition. 70% of everything. He raised his eyes slowly. "You must be joking." Tiana crossed her arms. "Do not be dramatic. You have more money than anyone needs. This is simply fair compensation for the emotional support I have provided you. 1 year of marriage is not nothing." He stared at her, waiting for a hint of remorse. There was none. "You are asking for 70% of a fortune you had no hand in building," he said quietly. "Why do you not go rob a bank instead?" She smirked, leaning forward slightly. "Cameron, stop making this harder than it needs to be. Whether you like it or not, a court will award me the majority. Women win these cases every day. My lawyer will bury you in hearings." Cameron placed the papers neatly back inside the envelope. "We will settle this in court." Her smile widened into something triumphant, nearly cruel. "I'm going to destroy you in that courtroom. When this is over, 70% of everything will be mine." She spun on her heel and walked away, her confidence filling the room like poisonous perfume. Cameron remained seated, his finger tapping the envelope rhythmically. There was no anger left in him, only resolve. Her arrogance had sealed her downfall. Her greed had sculpted her own coffin. He stood, picked up the envelope, and headed toward his study. Each step felt deliberate, grounded, final. By the time he placed the envelope on his desk, he was not thinking about betrayal anymore. He was thinking about justice. Tiana believed she was 10 steps ahead. She had no idea he had already walked 20. The morning of the hearing arrived with a crisp chill in the air, the kind that crept under the skin and lingered in the bones. A thin gray mist hovered over the city, as if the sky itself understood that something monumental was about to happen. Cameron stepped out of his town car with the composed grace of a man accustomed to public attention. Cameras flashed, reporters murmured, and whispers circulated along the courthouse steps as soon as he appeared. A Black American billionaire's divorce case always drew attention, but the true spectacle had not yet begun. Harold stood beside him with a calm, steely confidence. "Remember," Harold murmured, "say nothing unless the judge addresses you directly. Let the evidence speak." Cameron nodded once. He did not feel nerves or anger, only a cold, deliberate stillness. Inside his suit jacket, He carried the drive containing Tiana's recorded betrayal. But that was only one piece of the labyrinth of evidence Harold and the investigators now possessed. The police were already stationed discreetly near the back entrance, waiting for the hearing to conclude before executing the warrants. Everything was in place. Across the courtyard, a luxury white sports car pulled up with unnecessary flair. Tiana stepped out in a fitted ivory dress that hugged her like fresh arrogance. Her hair was curled into voluminous waves. Her makeup was flawless, glamorous, dramatic, designed for attention. Beside her, Eric Vaughn emerged wearing a navy suit that seemed too new, too crisp, too calculated. His smile was smug, his hand resting on the small of Tiana's back, as if he were claiming victory before the battle even began. Tiana laughed at something he whispered, tossing her hair back. She looked radiant, powerful, certain. When she spotted Cameron, her eyes glittered with a mix of mock sympathy and triumph. She did not bother hiding her smirk. Cameron held her gaze without flinching. He did not smile. He did not frown. He simply watched her as one might study the final piece of a puzzle. Beautiful, intricate, deceptive, but about to collapse. Inside the courtroom, murmurs spread as the trio entered. Tiana sauntered in with such confidence that even the bailiff arched a brow. Eric sat behind her, tried to appear invisible yet important, but failing at both. Cameron and Harold took their places quietly. Judge Everett Collins, a stern black American man known for his impatience with theatrics, entered briskly. "Let us begin." Tiana's lawyer rose quickly, a polished woman with a sharp bob and an even sharper tone. She began her performance immediately. "Your Honor, my client has endured severe emotional hardship during her marriage to Mr. Brooks. She supported him, dedicated her life to him, and contributed significantly to the emotional stability that allowed him to build his empire. Therefore, we are requesting a justified distribution of marital assets, specifically 70%. A few people in the gallery gasped. Even the judge looked up from his documents. Cameron remained perfectly still. Harold simply adjusted his glasses, waiting. Tiana lifted her chin proudly, her eyes gliding over the courtroom as if she were preparing to take a bow. She believed this was her moment, the climax of her scheme, the chapter in which she finally became wealthy on her own terms. But she had miscalculated the story entirely. When Tiana's lawyer finished her speech, Harold rose with the calm assurance of a man holding the final move in a chess match. "Your Honor," he began smoothly, "we have evidence that contradicts every claim presented by Mrs. Brooks." Tiana frowned. Her lawyer stiffened. Harold placed a thick folder on the judge's bench. "First, Mr. Brooks's companies and all major assets are owned through limited liability company structures established long before this marriage. Legally, Mrs. Brooks is entitled to none of them." Judge Collins flipped briefly through the documents. The limited liability company filings check out. Her claim to these assets is invalid. Tiana's lips parted in shock. Her attorney blinked rapidly. Harold continued, "Second, Your Honor, my client has been accused of emotional abuse. Yet, we have a recording, captured legally from internal home security installed prior to the marriage, revealing Mrs. Brooks detailing a premeditated plan to fabricate abuse claims in order to secure financial gain." A hush fell across the courtroom. Tiana's face drained of color. "No," she whispered under her breath, shaking her head slightly. Harold held up the encrypted drive. "With your permission, Your Honor." Judge Collins nodded. Harold pressed play. Tiana's voice filled every inch of the room, word for damning word. "Babe, we're going to cash out big. He is worth over $30 billion. Claim emotional abuse. Court favors women. If not 70%, at least half of his empire will be ours. If not for his money, what would I be doing with a boring man like him?" The playback ended with a silence, so thick it felt like a wall collapsing. Tiana trembled visibly. Eric leaned forward in his seat, face frozen. Judge Collins looked stunned. His voice was sharp when he finally spoke. "Mrs. Brooks, this recording contradicts every statement made in your petition." Tiana's lawyer tried to stand, but the judge raised a hand. Sit down. The tone permitted no argument. Harold was not finished. He opened the second folder. Your Honor, this case extends beyond marital misconduct. Our private investigator uncovered a 6-year fraud pattern involving Mrs. Brooks and Mr. Vaughn. They have targeted multiple wealthy men using romantic manipulation to extract assets before disappearing. He laid out photos, financial transfers, emails, travel logs, and detailed reports. The courtroom reacted with murmurs of disbelief, outrage, and shock. Tiana covered her mouth with a shaking hand. Her eyes darted wildly, searching for an escape that no longer existed. Judge Collins closed the final document and looked at her with a mix of disappointment and disgust. This court rules that Mrs. Brooks is entitled to nothing. Not alimony, not a percentage of any company, nothing. Tiana swayed slightly, gripping the desk for balance. And further, the judge continued, the court grants a divorce between Mr. Cameron Brooks and Mrs. Tiana Brooks, effective immediately. Before the echo of his words could fade, the courtroom doors opened. 2 uniformed officers and a detective stepped inside, their presence shifting the atmosphere instantly. Harold nodded at them. Detective Carla Jennings, a Black American woman with a firm gaze and calm voice, approached the table. Tiana Ellis Brooks and Eric Vaughn, you're under arrest for multiple counts of fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. Tiana gasped as an officer took her wrists. No, Cameron. Please, Cameron. I am your wife. Please. She reached for him, desperate, hysterical, mascara streaking down her cheeks. Cameron looked at her with calm, distant eyes. Not cruel, not triumphant, just finished. Eric tried to step back, muttering, this is a mistake. But 2 officers restrained him swiftly. Tiana's screams filled the room as she was handcuffed. Eric cursed under his breath as he was dragged toward the exit. Reporters outside heard the commotion and surged forward with cameras ready. Cameron turned away from the chaos. He buttoned his jacket, exhaled softly, and walked toward the courthouse doors with steady steps. Behind him, Tiana screamed his name, broken, panicked, collapsing under the weight of her own choices. But Cameron never looked back. She thought she was 10 steps ahead. She never realized he had already walked 20. If you enjoyed this story, please like, comment, and share this video with your friends. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a powerful story drop.